The air in the mountains always carried a certain silence with it, the kind you couldn't find anywhere else. It wasn't empty, it was alive. Every breeze whispered through the pines, every bird call echoed, every creek seemed to hum its own tune. That weekend, I thought I had finally carved out some peace for myself at the family's old cabin. No work emails, no neighbors, no drama, just me, the firewood stacked neatly by the porch, and the sound of nature keeping me company. But peace has a funny way of being temporary, especially when someone like Karen is in charge of your neighborhood's HOA. She was the kind of woman who lived for conflict, the sort who always needed someone to boss around. She wasn't satisfied until she'd found some petty reason to make another homeowner miserable. People called her the Hawk behind her back because she was always watching, always circling, waiting for the smallest excuse to swoop in. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with her name, and my stomach sank before I even opened the message. "Your property is in violation," it read. "Unapproved structures." "Expect an inspection," I frowned. "Unapproved structures?" She had to be talking about the firewood stacked by the porch. It wasn't even touching the cabin. Just a few neat piles ready for the fireplace. But Karen didn't care about common sense. She cared about control. I set the phone down and tried to shake it off, telling myself she couldn't do anything. After all, this was a family cabin, private land tucked away in the woods. The HOA had no say out here. Still, the knot in my stomach didn't loosen. With Karen, reason never mattered. Minutes later, the crunch of tires on gravel broke the silence. My head snapped up. Nobody came up this far unless they belonged here. Slowly, I stepped out onto the porch. That's when I saw it. A beat-up SUV lumbered its way up the driveway, stopping right at the edge of the cabin. The doors swung open and two men climbed out. They weren't police. They weren't officials. Their black jackets had the words HOA Security printed in bold white letters across the back. But the stitching looked cheap, like something ironed on the night before. The first man, tall and lanky with a permanent scowl etched across his face, marched up the porch steps as if he owned the place. The other, heavier and slower, stayed back but wore the same smug look, like he was already enjoying the thought of writing me a ticket. "You," the tall one barked, pointing at me as though I were a criminal. "This property is in violation of HOA codes. We're here to inspect." I stared at him in disbelief, then let out a short laugh. "You're kidding, right? This isn't HOA property. You've got no jurisdiction here." The heavier one smirked, pulling out a phone. "Karen told us otherwise. And if you don't cooperate, we'll fine you. Maybe more." Something about the way he said, "maybe more," made my jaw tighten. They were trying to intimidate me, to push me into folding under Karen's ridiculous demands. I crossed my arms, planting myself firmly on the porch. "You're trespassing. I'm telling you right now, leave before this gets ugly." They didn't budge. The tall one smirked, tilting his head like he'd already won. "Karen said you'd resist. She told us to document everything. So go ahead, resist. We'll have proof." The other one started recording with his phone, slowly panning it across the firewood, the porch, and finally, my face. He grinned like he'd just caught a criminal red-handed. I wanted to snatch the phone out of his hand, but something stopped me. A sound. At first, I thought it was distant thunder. Low, rolling, faint against the trees. But thunder didn't grow louder, steadier, more powerful with each passing second. This was something else. The tall one paused mid-sentence, his smirk faltering as he glanced over his shoulder. The heavier one lowered his phone, eyebrows knitting together in confusion. The sound grew louder, closer, until it wasn't just noise, it was vibration. The porch beneath my boots hummed with it. The gravel on the driveway trembled, then it clicked. Engines, motorcycles, not one, not two. A pack. I couldn't help the grin that spread across my face. I knew that sound. I knew it better than my own heartbeat. The men exchanged uneasy glances, suddenly unsure of themselves, and then, through the trees they appeared. 6 Harley-Davidsons, gleaming chrome catching the late afternoon sun, headlights cutting through the shadows, rolled down the dirt road like an unstoppable wave. The roar of their engines filled the air, commanding every inch of space around us. The HOA thugs froze in place, their earlier confidence evaporating as the bikes pulled into the driveway in perfect formation. Dust swirled around the tires as the engines thundered to a halt. One by one, the riders removed their helmets. And there, leading the pack, was my cousin Jack. Jack had served in the army for over a decade, seen places most people couldn't even point to on a map. A scar stretched across his cheek, a souvenir from a mission he never talked about. His eyes, though, sharp, steady, unblinking, were enough to silence anyone foolish enough to challenge him, and right now, those eyes were locked on the two men on my porch. He swung one leg over his Harley, boots hitting the gravel with a heavy crunch. Behind him, my other cousins followed, 6 veterans in total, each one carrying the kind of quiet authority you didn't question. They didn't need words. Their presence alone said everything. The tall security guard took a step back, his fake authority collapsing with every second. We were just, he stammered. Jack didn't say a word. He simply walked forward, slow, deliberate, letting the silence choke the air. He didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to announce who he was. His very existence made the so-called security shrink where they stood. The heavy one swallowed hard, lowering his phone, his hand shaking now. The smirk that had been plastered on his face moments ago was gone, replaced by something else. Fear. Jack finally stopped a few feet from them, resting his gloved hands on his belt. He looked at me, gave a small nod, then turned his attention back to the trespassers. His voice was calm even, but carried the weight of a man who'd commanded soldiers. "You boys lost?" Neither of them answered. The engines of the Harleys still ticked in the background, the smell of fuel and dust lingering in the air, wrapping the moment in a heavy silence, and for the first time that day, it wasn't me who felt pressure in my chest. It was them, the so-called enforcers of Karen's will. They had walked up that porch thinking they were wolves, but now, surrounded by real warriors, they realized what they truly were. Just sheep. And my grin widened, because this was only the beginning. The gravel driveway was silent except for the faint tick of cooling engines. 6 Harleys stood like sentinels under the fading orange light, their riders dismounted but still towering, broad-shouldered and utterly unshaken. My cousins had that look veterans carried, the kind that said they'd seen worse than anything the world could throw at them. The 2 men on the porch, however, looked like balloons losing air. Their shoulders sagged, their fake confidence drained from their faces. They weren't security. They weren't law. They were just 2 hired bullies, and they knew it. Jack's question still lingered in the air, sharp as a blade. "You boys lost?" The tall one tried to laugh, but it came out shaky, hollow. "No, we're just here to check on something." HOA complaint. "Nothing serious." Jack tilted his head slowly, his expression unreadable. "Complaint? Out here?" He swept his gaze across the wide stretch of pines, the cabin tucked into the mountains, the untouched land around us. Funny. Looks like private property to me. My cousin Mark, bigger than Jack and with a ranger's posture that made his chest look like a wall, stepped forward. "You 2 do realize you're trespassing, right? That's a felony." His voice was steady but dangerous, like thunder before a storm. The heavier guard fumbled with his words, his voice cracking. Karen sent us. She said this place is under HOA jurisdiction." At that, every single one of my cousins chuckled. Not loud laughter, but the low, rumbling kind that meant trouble. The kind of sound you hear in the dark when predators are close. Jack leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. "Let me make something clear. Karen doesn't own this land. Neither does her little club. This cabin has been in our family for 3 generations, and I'll be damned if I let a couple of punks stroll in here and try to play cop." The men shifted uneasily, glancing between each other, clearly trying to find an escape. But my cousin Sam, a wiry Marine with tattoos crawling up his arms, stepped up to block the porch steps. "Leaving already?" His grin was sharp, mocking. "But you just got here. Why don't you explain to us what your inspection was supposed to look like?" The tall one raised his hands in surrender. "Look, we weren't trying to cause trouble," Karen said. Karen said, Mark interrupted with a scoff. "You 2 sound like her parrots." "Let me guess. She pays you a couple bucks to play dress up and scare homeowners? The heavier man flushed, his jaw tight. He wanted to argue, but surrounded by 6 hardened veterans, the words died in his throat. Jack's patience was thinning. He straightened to his full height, towering over the men. You've got one chance. Get in your car and drive off this property. Don't come back. And tell Karen if she wants to come herself. We'll be waiting. The silence stretched for a moment, broken only by the wind in the trees. Then finally the tall one gave a quick nod. Fine, we're leaving. They turned toward the SUV, trying to mask their panic. But before they could make it down the steps, my cousin Luke, the quietest of the bunch, spoke up. His voice was low even, but it froze the men in their tracks. Leave your phones. The heavy guard stiffened. What? No way. Jack's eyes flicked to Luke, then back to the men. You've been recording, haven't you? Trespassing, harassment, threats. I don't think you want the sheriff seeing that. Drop the phones. The tall one hesitated, his hand gripping his pocket tight. He wanted to resist, but Mark took one step closer, and the look in his eyes was enough to change his mind. Reluctantly, both men pulled their phones out and set them on the porch railing. Jack picked them up, held them for a moment, then tossed them to me. We'll wipe them later. Evidence goes both ways. The 2 guards were trembling now, caught between humiliation and fear. They stumbled down the steps, scrambling toward their SUV. Gravel flew as they slammed the doors and gunned the engine, tearing down the road as fast as the old vehicle could carry them. For a long moment, the silence of the woods returned. The only sound was the faint rustle of leaves and the distant call of a bird. My cousin stood still, watching until the SUV disappeared beyond the trees. Finally, Sam let out a laugh. That's it? I was hoping they'd put up more of a fight. Trust me, Jack said, brushing the dust from his gloves. Cowards like that never do. Mark turned to me, a grin breaking through his stern face. You should have called us sooner. Karen's been pulling this stunt on you for how long? I exhaled, shaking my head. Too long. She's always had it out for me. Always looking for an excuse, but sending fake security out here. That's new. Jack's jaw tightened. She's testing boundaries. People like her push until someone pushes back. He glanced at the cabin, then back at me. Well, she just got her warning. We gathered around the porch, the 6 of them forming a loose circle like they'd done countless times in deployment. They weren't just my cousins in that moment, they were a unit, a shield, a wall against anything Karen or her lackeys could try. The firewood crackled faintly in the stack beside us, the smell of pine smoke drifting from the chimney. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky with streaks of gold and purple. For the first time all day, I felt the tension in my chest ease. Jack clapped me on the shoulder, his grip firm. Don't worry about her. If she comes again, she won't just be dealing with you. Damn right, Sam added with a grin. Next time, maybe we'll bring the whole crew. Karen won't know what hit her. The others laughed, their voices echoing across the woods, blending with the sound of the wind in the trees. It was the kind of laughter that made you feel safe, like nothing outside that cabin could touch you. But deep down, I knew Karen wasn't finished. She wasn't the type to back off, not after being embarrassed. If anything, tonight would only fuel her anger. She'd come back, louder, angrier, maybe with more tricks up her sleeve. Still, as I looked at the line of Harleys gleaming in the fading light, as I felt the presence of 6 men who had faced down worse enemies than Karen could ever dream of being, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever she tried next, she wouldn't win. Because this wasn't just my fight anymore. It was family. And in the mountains, under the watch of the old cabin and the unshakable bond of blood, family meant everything.